what diet culture is like in France. So a few months ago, a friend asked me whether I thought diet culture was really bad in France or if it was like worse than in the US. And my initial reaction was no. But then I thought about it a little longer and I realized that it wasn't that simple. So we're going to talk about that in this video. So first, if we look at an overview of diet culture in France and in the US, I think the most important thing to understand is that it does stem from the same issue, that is fat phobia and general non-acceptance of larger bodies and putting thinner bodies on a pedestal and really just catering to these thinner bodies. So that issue is in both countries and in probably a lot of countries. That being said, I do think that this kind of like fat shaming leading to diet culture manifests itself in different ways in France or in the US. I would say that in France, diet culture is less overt, but again, there is still a lot of fat shaming, and I would say that being overweight is associated with like negative stereotypes, like being lazy and not taking care of yourself and not being healthy. I feel like French people are less open-minded in that aspect than American people, maybe because they are less used to it. They might think things, but nobody is gonna say something to you. And also I feel like the standards for being like thin in France and maybe in Europe in general are lower than in the US. I mean, maybe a person who would be considered like thin in the US would be considered chubby or a little bit overweight in France. But still, that being said, I do think that France falls into diet culture less than the US. I think that again in France it's more subtle. It's not going to be as like commercialized as in the US. I feel like in the US you have diet culture stuff like in your face at all times. In France, it's not like that. If you want to learn more about the French diet and what they do in order to eat in a way that is healthy without falling into diet culture, then definitely check out my course that I have on understanding French diet and learning to eat like the French. And if you want, there's also a free webinar that you can watch before that on understanding the French paradox. And after the webinar, you'll get the opportunity to get a discount on the course for a few days. So make sure that you check that out. The link will be in the description. I think that this is linked to France just having, in general, a better understanding of nutrition. French people know that fat diets don't work and like supplements and pills and stuff like that. That's not going to be their focus, and there's not like the government isn't trying to capitalize on French people being overweight and sick and then trying to make them lose weight in ways that are even worse for their health. Like that's not really a thing in France. So we're lucky for that. French people know that in order to lose weight, they need to have healthier eating habits, that they need to eat mainly whole foods and like stay away from processed foods as much as possible, but they also need to be eating full meals, balanced meals. They shouldn't be skipping meals, they shouldn't be going on like fad diets or like weird trends, all of that. I would say that in France the mindset tends to be more positive in general, like holistic. It's more of a general approach to weight loss, whereas in the US it's more about like quick fixes and like fad diets. So now let's take a look at how the French do that. So first, the approach to diet products is very different, and that's why my initial reaction was to say that there wasn't like diet culture wasn't as bad in France. There really is not a huge market for dieting, the dieting industry, like diet products and like weight loss pills and like supplements and all of that like there is in the US. Like I feel like in the US you will see something branded towards weight loss or going on a diet literally everywhere you walk. Like you're gonna find a tiny little diet section in grocery stores or in pharmacies where there's going to be some like low sugar products or some supplements that can help boost your weight loss, or like weird soups, things like that that you can drink, or like smoothies. But it's a very, very small portion and it's in a very like specific area. It's not something that's gonna jump out at you all the time. France really tries to emphasize balance, moderation, instead of like complete restriction. and you can like never eat that. You have to eat low carb, you have to eat like no sugars, you have to eat no fats, just protein. So in France, there isn't as much food stigma at all. Carbs are not demonized, fats are not demonized. French people, even if they're trying to lose weight, they will know that eating whole carbs is important. They will know that eating fats is important. So in that aspect, it's much less like diet culture-y than in the US. And French people will eat bread, pasta, rice, pastries, and like fat-filled things without guilt. They will just try to do so in moderation and to make sure that they also are having like a ton of veggies to go along with these foods. Snacking isn't stigmatized either in France. Also, because the way that they snack is different, they are maybe going to take a moment between lunch and dinner to have a little portioned out, balanced out snack where they can have maybe some bread and like some chocolate and some fruit. It doesn't have to be like 2 almonds. It can be of substance, but they're not going to take a bag of chips or a bag of cookies and graze on that all day. So in that sense, there's no like negative connotation towards snacking because of the way they snack and like the foods that they snack. But they would probably feel guilty if they were trying to lose weight and they were to have like a grocery store bought cookie for a snack. And that brings us to our next point, the emphasis on whole foods. French culture leans towards eating mainly whole foods, a bunch of whole grains, fruit and veggies, fresh, local, in season most of the time. That's what they prefer. Meat and dairy products like cheese also have their place in a French diet. Processed foods are not viewed as something that you want to consume regularly, definitely in France. People in France just like to make their meals from scratch. They don't like to use processed foods, or when they do, there is a negative connotation towards that, even if in some cases it shouldn't be there. So basically the type of foods that French people will demonize within diet culture is different. It's really going to be this focus on processed foods, like really highly processed foods, but not at all on like carbs or fats, meats, dairy, whatever. As long as things are whole foods for them, they're fine. They can eat that. It's like not a problem. French people will definitely use like diet culture wording when it comes to certain foods. And like certain ways of eating, they will definitely say things like, oh, I was so good because I didn't eat that cookie, or oh no, I was so bad because I ate more than I wanted and now I don't feel comfortable. But it's not to the extent as I've seen it in the US, where people will feel bad for eating when they're hungry or for having a little bit of pasta or stuff like that. So I'd say that the French approach is a bit healthier. It's a bit more like there's a bit more logic to it in terms of the benefits of foods. However, it's still not healthy and it's still diet culture. Another thing French people focus on is portion control. That is also something that they will try to reduce if they get into like a diet culture mindset. It's not going to be about restricting certain foods or eliminating food groups. It's going to be about having smaller amounts of what they're already having. And that can definitely be like diet culture-y sometimes because they will allow themselves to have only like teeny tiny portions. Portion size isn't generally where most French people find the pleasure in eating. They will assess the quality of something and the enjoyment factor of something on how they like the food, like the quality of the food, how it's prepared, the flavors, and not really the quantity. So I would say they are more okay with having these smaller portions. And then to get into meal enjoyment a little bit more, meals are really seen as like this social experience, very enjoyable moment for French people, and eating is really seen as like this mindful, pleasurable experience. It's not like a kind of transactional almost, like sometimes it is in the US, like, okay, I need energy, so I'm gonna eat. I feel like in this aspect, France is less rooted in diet culture because they will not do things like most French people won't like go to restaurants and then not eat anything because they don't want other people to see them like what they're eating, and then go home and wolf down a bunch of processed foods. Not really. Even at home, most French people will not prevent themselves from enjoying a meal because like they don't deserve to eat. They are definitely going to have some thoughts that are rooted in diet culture, but it's going to be more about managing the size, like the portion of what they're eating, rather than completely skipping meals or banning food groups of like entire things. And this is also because they understand the importance of enjoying what they're eating and for the meal experience to be pleasurable in order to actually lose weight in a way that is sustainable. And then to talk about like fitness, physical activity in general, this is, I think, a big difference with France and the US is that France, like the diet culture doesn't really extend into physical activity. People will not, most of them, not try to like earn their calories by exercising or punish themselves for eating by exercising. Exercise and like physical activity in general is more integrated into their daily lives. They're gonna walk more, they're gonna be more active, they are gonna just move more. And it's not necessarily about going to the gym like hours every day. If they want to lose weight, that's not really what they're gonna turn to. They're gonna find things that they enjoy doing and do that in terms of exercise. So exercise here is more rooted in like the health aspect. I want to do something good for my body, I want to feel good. And it's not really like, okay, I am so fat, I need to lose all this weight, I'm gonna exercise a ton. So in short, while France definitely does experience diet culture, it does not manifest in the same way as in the US, and there is this stigmatization, this fat shaming, of course, that's undeniable. There's just general better food education here. People are more aware of nutrition, and most people know that fad diets don't work and that the way to eat healthy is to eat mainly whole foods, enjoy your meals, have balanced meals, plenty of fruit and veggies. Like, they know these things, so they are less likely to fall into like diet culture traps. But that being said, diet culture is still way too prevalent in France, but I guess not as bad as the US. That's it for this video. I hope that you found that interesting, this topic. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to like the video and subscribe, and see you on my next one. Bye.